When the song "Take Me Home," Country Roads started playing everywhere, people fell in love with the sweet voice of John Denver. For the next 20 years, this singer, songwriter, and actor became one of the biggest acoustic stars of the 1970s and one of the top-selling artists of that time. He wasn't just a great singer. John Denver was the kind of celebrity everyone looked up to. But when the cameras weren't rolling, his private life was so wild and upsetting that fans could not believe it was the same guy they adored. Stories from his ex-wives and police reports about things he did wrong turned out to be real, even though fans wished they weren't. Now, after years of people guessing, the real truth about who he was has finally come out. And it's even more shocking than anyone thought. John Denver was born Henry Juan Deutschendorf on December 31, 1943. He grew up in Roswell, New Mexico, in a family that was crazy about airplanes. His dad, Captain Henry Deutschendorf Sr., was a famous Air Force pilot who set 3 speed records in a bomber called the B-58 Hustler. People in the military thought he was a hero and even put him in the Air Force Hall of Fame. But for little John, the bad part of this cool life was that military families move all the time. They lived in Arizona, Alabama, and Texas in just a few years. John could never keep friends because they never stayed anywhere long. Right when he started feeling at home, they had to pack up again. This made him feel super lonely and like he never really belonged, a feeling that stuck with him his whole life. When John was 11 and living in Tucson, Arizona, his grandma gave him an old Gibson guitar from 1910. By then, the guitar was already over 40 years old. That guitar became the one thing that always stayed the same for him, and he played it whenever he felt lonely. Soon he started singing with the Tucson R.E.M. Zona Boys Chorus, where he learned to sing harmony and perform on stage. By high school, he was already playing folk songs at little local shows. Music stopped being just a hobby. It was how he felt okay in a life that kept changing. One big change was his super strict dad. His father, nicknamed Dutch, always pushed John to be perfect at everything. But John was a chill guy who just wanted to write songs. This made things tough between father and son. Still, they both loved flying. When John learned to fly planes, it finally gave them something fun to do together and brought them closer. Maybe the danger of flying reminded them how important family is. That same danger would later cause something terrible in John's life. For John, the free feeling he got while flying showed up a lot in his songs. After high school, John went to Texas Tech University to study architecture. But he quickly figured out he didn't want to draw buildings. He wanted to make music. So he dropped out and moved to Los Angeles. Around that time, he changed his last name to Denver because he loved the mountains and rivers of Colorado. It felt like starting over fresh. In the mid-1960s, John got his big chance. Out of about 200 singers who tried out, he was picked to be the new lead singer of the Chad Mitchell Trio. This was his first real job in music, let him perform all over the country. He stayed with the group for about 2 years and made 3 albums. Being on stage made him way more confident. Life traveling was hard, but he loved it and slowly found his own style. One of the most famous songs he wrote back then was "Leaving on a Jet Plane." Peter, Paul, and Mary recorded it, and by the end of the 1960s it hit #1 on the Billboard charts. Even though John wasn't a solo star yet, that song proved he could write hits that touched people's hearts. When the trio broke up, John was ready to go solo. Switching from group singer to solo star was hard, but he made it look easy. His career really exploded in the early 1970s with the album Poems, Prayers, Promises. Take Me Home, Country Roads became a forever classic. but it almost didn't make it. The first recordings had bad sound problems, and it looked like the song might flop. But his new manager, Jerry Weintraub, refused to give up. He begged radio stations, starting in Denver, Colorado, to play it. The song came out in April and slowly got popular. By late August, it reached number 2 on the Hot 100, sold over 1 million copies, and went gold that same month. Over the years, it kept selling and eventually went past 1.5 million digital copies just in the U.S. The song was so loved that West Virginia made it one of their official state songs. In 1972, John released the album Rocky Mountain High in September. It was his 6th album and the first one to hit the top 10 in America. It reached number 4 on the Billboard 200. The title song Rocky Mountain High became one of his biggest hits, reaching the top 10 in 1973. That year it was number 29 on the year-end chart and became the favorite of everyone who loved nature. The album photo was taken at Slaughterhouse Falls in Aspen, Colorado, so the song felt extra personal. Years later, Colorado made Rocky Mountain High one of its 2 official state songs. 1974 and 1975 were John's absolute peak. In just 18 months, he had 4 number 1 songs on the Hot 100. Sunshine on My Shoulders hit number 1 in March 1974. Annie's song came next in July. Thank God I'm a Country Boy reached the top in May 1975. And I'm Sorry hit number 1 in September the same year. The songs showed all his different sides, some soft and sweet. Oh, there's Super Happy and Bouncy. Annie's song, which he wrote in 10 minutes for his wife, became a wedding classic. At this time, John was all over the radio, TV, and in everyone's house. During these golden years, he also put out 3 albums that went straight to number 1. His greatest hits album from 1973 became the biggest-selling album in RCA Records history. It even beat Elvis Presley. Back Home Again from 1974 went triple platinum in the U.S. Wind Song from 1975 went double platinum. These 3 albums proved he was a real superstar. By the end of his career, he had written or co-written about 200 of his roughly 300 songs. He earned 12 gold albums and 4 platinum ones. Worldwide, his records sold over 33 million copies, making him one of the most successful singer-songwriters of the whole 1970s. Moving into movies surprised everyone, but worked great. In 1977, he starred with comedy legend George Burns in the huge hit movie Oh, God. Even though he had never acted, his warm, honest personality made people love him on screen. The movie, directed by Carl Reiner and based on a book by Avery Corman, was about a normal grocery manager picked by God to spread a message. John's acting felt real, so audiences connected fast. The film made over $51 million in the U.S. and even got an Oscar nomination for the script. Even though he didn't do the sequels, his first movie role showed he could do more than sing. He became one of the few singers who actually made it as an actor, too. John also got huge in other countries, even when critics said he wouldn't. His manager, Jerry Weintraub, thought it was important to go straight to the fans, so he set up TV specials in Britain, even though some people doubted it would work. He said, "If the critics won't make him a star, we'll go right to the people." It worked perfectly. John's friendly smile and clear voice won British hearts and built a giant fan base all over Europe. The specials proved TV was an awesome way to reach new countries and turned him into a worldwide star. One special, An Evening with John Denver, even won a Primetime Emmy Award, one of the biggest TV prizes. He did many more shows where he sang, told stories, and played with guest artists. Every show felt like he was singing just for you, and that made him one of the most loved performers ever. But John was more than a singer. In the mid-1980s, he spoke in front of the U.S. Senate when parents wanted warning stickers on bad music. Even though his songs were clean, he fought for free speech. People had once banned Rocky Mountain High thinking it was about drugs, but it wasn't. He told the truth and said artists should be free to express ideas. Everyone expected him to side with the parents, but he didn't. That speech changed how people talked about music and free speech, and we still feel it today. That same year, John became the first American artist in over 10 years to play in the Soviet Union during the Cold War. He did concerts in 11 cities, including Moscow, Leningrad, and Tallinn. It wasn't just a tour. It was about bringing people together. Even people who didn't speak English cried at his songs about peace. After the trip, he wrote a song called "Let Us Begin" that begged for peace instead of fighting. The live recordings became an album called John Denver Live in the USSR. In the late 1980s, after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster forced thousands from their homes and made many sick, John flew back for a benefit concert in Moscow that raised tons of money. Extra cash came from selling the recordings. That night wasn't about politics. It was about caring. The crowd felt loved. John proved one guy with a guitar could really help. In the early 1990s, he took his music to China, a country that had been closed to the West for years. Kids in Chinese schools were already singing country roads. The government invited him to tour cities, and one concert was watched by over 2 billion people. Some wanted to hold shows at famous places like the Forbidden City. Young people went crazy for him, and even China's leader had noticed him years earlier. The tour made him the most popular Western singer in China back then. Later in life, John cared more about helping people. In the 1990s, he put out a greatest hits album called Homegrown and gave every cent to homeless charities. Around the same time, he co-founded the World Hunger Project. For that work, he got the Presidential World Without Hunger Award. He also fought hard for the environment, using his fame to wake people up about the planet. He started the Windstar Foundation and a project called Plant It 2000 to plant trees and fix forests. Helping others became as big to him as music, but his home life was full of hurt. His first marriage to Annie Martell started like a fairy tale. They adopted 2 kids, and he wrote Annie's song for her in 10 minutes. But as he got more famous, their problems grew. Annie felt ignored and hidden behind his spotlight. By the early 1980s, they divorced. It got ugly and painful. In public, John was gentle, but at home, he could be totally different. Reports said he got mad and scary. One day, after Annie cut down trees he loved at their Aspen house, John showed up with a chainsaw and cut their bed and furniture in half. It was a crazy, dark moment that showed how broken the marriage was. Friends couldn't believe Quiet John did that. But he was the one who filed for divorce. Court papers talked about abuse and wrecked his good guy image. Friends backed Annie, and even old managers said he had a bad temper. Annie never talked much after, but the damage was done. Lots of fans now saw him differently. John met his second wife, Australian singer and actress Cassandra Delaney, in the mid-1980s in a Sydney hotel bar where he was playing. He fell for her right away. They got married fast, in a pretty mountain wedding, with family and close friends. It looked perfect, but trouble started early. Cassandra later said dating a superstar was really hard. He was much older, fame followed them everywhere, and his moods changed fast. To the world they looked happy, but at home it was stressful. In the late 1980s, their daughter Jessie Bell was born. John had thought he couldn't have kids because of a childhood sickness, so Jesse felt like a miracle. Some wondered if they used doctors to help. After Jesse arrived, John got more controlling. Cassandra felt him become jealous and cold. Their marriage started falling apart. In the mid-90s, Cassandra told an Australian magazine that John had no real friends. Staff were scared of him. Secretaries cried and quit a lot. He looked gentle on stage, but she said it was fake. At home, he drank heavily, yelled, and tried to control everything. She stayed quiet for years, hoping he'd change, but he didn't. They split in the early 1990s and divorced a couple years later. The court fight was nasty. John sued her for millions and said she made him look stupid. Cassandra fought hard for custody of Jesse. John later wrote in his book how much the divorce hurt him. He said he was never the same after. In the mid-1990s, he released his autobiography, Take Me Home. It shocked fans. He admitted using marijuana, LSD, and cocaine. He also said he cheated on both wives. Even the marriage that gave us Annie's song had lots of affairs. He wrote that sometimes he got way too violent. One story everyone remembered was him cutting the bed in half with a chainsaw. His perfect image was gone. Fans saw a side they never dreamed of. John Denver had once been one of America's favorite singer-songwriters of the 1970s. He topped the charts and won millions of hearts with his soft voice and guitar. His label RCA put out 25 of his albums, 13 gold and 8 platinum. His greatest hits was the biggest album RCA ever had. But by the mid-1980s, music changed to synths and drum machines, and his style didn't fit anymore. In 1986, after RCA got bought by General Electric, the company wanted to save money and push newer acts. Even though John had made them rich for years, they dropped him. He was stunned. He had just finished an album called One World, thinking his contract would renew for sure. Instead, they let him go to make more money with others. John felt they took him for granted after everything he did for them. No other big label wanted him, so he had to start his own label called Windstar. It was a hard lesson that even huge stars can get left behind when music and business change. John spent over 20,000 hours flying planes. He had licenses for single-engine, multi-engine, gliders, and even balloons. But in the 1990s, his personal problems caught up. He got arrested twice for driving drunk. The FAA, the people who control flying rules, said pilots need a medical certificate to prove they're healthy to fly. After the second arrest, they refused to give him a new certificate. Without it, his pilot license was useless. To get it back, he had to prove he stopped drinking, but he never finished the steps. Flying used to be his happiest thing, but now it was taken away. It got worse because he ignored the FAA letters telling him to turn in the old certificate. He either threw them away or sent them back unopened. Because he never accepted the letters, the FAA couldn't fully cancel his license. A weird legal trick. So on paper he could still fly, but only because he cheated the system. That trick ended in March 1997 when he finally signed for one letter. From that day on, every time he flew, it was illegal. Getting his license back legally would have meant proving he was sober and following all the rules he skipped. But he didn't want to. Still, he kept flying anyway. On October 12, 1997, he took a small experimental plane he had bought just the day before. He was practicing takeoffs and landings near Monterey, California. He had only about 30 minutes of instruction before flying it alone. The plane was heavily changed and tricky to fly. The worst part was the fuel switch. It was moved behind the pilot's left shoulder, super hard to reach. To change tanks, He had to twist around and sometimes use pliers because it was stiff. The fuel gauges were behind him too, so he needed a little mirror to see them, and even then they were unclear. That day, while practicing near Monterey Peninsula Airport, he used up almost all the fuel in the left tank. People on the ground heard the engine cough and then stop. When the fuel ran out, John tried to switch to the right tank. While twisting to grab the valve with pliers, he accidentally pushed the right rudder pedal too hard. The nose dropped fast, and seconds later, the plane smashed into the Pacific Ocean. John died instantly. The official report from the National Transportation Safety Board said he started with way too little fuel, only about 3 gallons in one tank and 6 in the other. They said not knowing the weird plane well enough was a huge reason for the crash. They also blamed the bad design that made switching fuel almost impossible in the air. Even though John was a great pilot, he didn't prepare right for this plane. The report said the crash didn't have to happen. If he had filled the tanks, practiced more, or picked a safer plane, he would probably still be alive. His last flight showed how tiny mistakes and ignored rules can end in disaster. John Denver's death in 1997 wasn't just sad. It showed the messy side of his life. Millions cried for the gentle folk singer they loved, but the crash also brought out stories of his risky side. He loved flying so much he sometimes did dangerous stunts in gliders and flew without proper medical papers. It was a pattern of pushing limits too far. Even after the FAA warned him over and over and took his medical certificate, he kept flying. The crash came from a bunch of bad choices: low fuel, tricky plane, no flight plan, flying alone. Those choices weren't accidents. They fit a bigger picture of taking risks that finally cost him everything. Tests after the crash showed no alcohol or drugs in his body that day, but his earlier drunk driving arrests and a car crash while drinking had already hurt his good guy image. Still, even with all the flaws, his legacy is huge. His songs still make people feel peace, love for nature, and big emotions all over the world. Take Me Home, Country Roads, Annie's Song, and Rocky Mountain High are still classic favorites. He was one of the first big stars to make saving the planet a main part of his message, way before most celebrities did. In the end, fans choose to remember John Denver for his love of nature and beautiful music instead of his mistakes. The 15-foot bronze statue of him at Red Rocks Amphitheater in Colorado keeps reminding everyone of the amazing artist who sang about those country roads.